Thank you so much for coming out today. We are going to go over the listing agreement and the related items. The most common claim has always been seller failure to disclose, okay? So buyers come back, say the seller didn't tell me, right? Well, one of the things that we're seeing that is trending is that, of course, that buyer gets an attorney, and the first thing that attorney says is name all of the real estate companies and the realtors, okay? As soon as you guys get named, that's when we have to file an E&O claim. That's when you have to write a deductible. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is what's in our purchase agreement. So it's truly the language of the purchase agreement, and then what tools we can utilize to go ahead and make sure that we are setting the right expectations with our seller, and letting them know what their obligations are so that they can get the wheels turning and do the right thing and not get sued down the road. And it protects you, because the first thing that happens is that attorney says, did you even talk to the seller about their obligations? And you're like, well, I gave them a form and they signed it. Yeah, the attorney does not think that's enough. So with that, we can go over, yes, we set the expectations, and this is where we did it. This is where it's covered in the purchase, or in the listing agreement. I'm going to say purchase a lot today, you guys. I really mean listing. So that's what we're going to go over today. Okay? So that's really why we do all of that stuff. Now, what we're going to go over today is we're just going to talk about the language in the form. And the awesome thing about being able to sit on these committees is that I do get to hear the attorneys as to why they put something in the form. So I'm going to talk about the actual language and what the intent of the language is. Okay? The way that translates is we all drive on the freeway and there's a speed limit sign, right? It says 65. Okay? I'm going to tell you that 65 is the speed limit, and the intent of that is to keep everybody on the same page to avoid accidents. Now, your broker can say, no, 72, go 72 on the freeway. You're all good, okay? And your broker's right. Don't listen to me, okay? Your broker is going to advise you how to practice in the field. I'm just going to talk about the forms. Now, people will say, but wait a minute, I've heard that explained a different way. You're right. There's interpretation on everything, okay? The speed limit sign says 65. I'd be willing to bet that if we all got in our cars and we all got on the freeway, we would not all go 65. We are going to interpret that sign, speed limit. I think that that's a target, a suggestion, and if I'm in a rush, then I can go faster. Some people will look at it and go, ooh, that seems like that's the limit, so I'll go under, right? It's all about interpretation, which is why we have so many attorneys in California, because I can ask 10 attorneys on one paragraph, what is your interpretation of this, and get 10 different answers. That's why we say that it's a legal argument and it's a legal opinion. So again, we're going to go over the intent. And the reason for that is because then when you're sitting with a client, you can talk about the intent of it, and if something comes up, you can go back to what is the intent of the paragraph. And now with this new obstacle, how should I react to best come to that end result that the intent was going towards? All right, so our listing contract. Who was around when we actually had a listing contract that was just the listing contract? It wasn't bundled with anything, right? Remember that? 3 pages was when I started. Yeah, well now we bundle everything. And as much as that is, I laugh about that. That is awesome, because that was C.A.R. jumping in to protect us, okay? When we look at our bundled documents, so our RPA and our RLA, okay, that bundle, in the order that it is in the bundle, okay, is what's required by law. Now, how many people are actually told that they're not going to get paid their commission because agency was not signed in the right order? Doesn't happen very often, but it can. And that's why C.A.R. puts the bundles together in the way that they do. So when you look at it and you go, well, that's not my style. I want to start with this and I want to go here. Don't do that, okay? I know I did that when I was new. I was like, oh, I'll start with the easy. I'll start with the contract and then I'll finish with the easy stuff like agency. You know, that seems easy. Didn't know that you really had to do that before the contract. So under the law, you do. So definitely work in the order of the bundle. Our listing agreement now is 6 pages. The additional items bring everything to 15 pages. And the residential listing agreement is always going to be the template for every other listing agreement that we have in the library. Because we have different disciplines, we have different things. So if we're looking at the commercial listing agreement, if we're looking at probate listing agreement, anything additional, this will always be the template for it. One of the things that C.A.R. really wanted to do was take the RPA and the RLA and make them the center of the universe for all transactions, and then you would just add addenda. So with our residential purchase agreement, remember we used to have a mobile home purchase agreement. Now instead we just add an addendum that addresses those particular things. So same type of thing that they're moving towards with the RLA. We're going to go in order in the bundle, but going through this. So agency, one of the things that we look at when we're talking about agency, it is the first thing in there because it is the law, okay? Well, the law says that we don't get paid if we don't do agency right, okay? So, and in the law, civil code, it says very specifically that we have to do a couple different things. We have to tell the client what types of agency are available. We have to declare what type of agency it will be. Then we have to confirm that. So when we look at our contracts, okay, they're set up to do that as long as we do everything in order. So here I'm saying, look, there's different types of agency. I can be just the seller's agent, which means I have fiduciary duty to you, okay? And it's directly to you. I could be, in this instance, obviously I'm sitting down on a listing agreement, but there's buyer's agency, right? And then there is dual agency, agent representing both buyer and the seller, okay? So that is that first step in agency law, right? I'm telling them what's available, okay? Now, then when I go into it, when I sign the listing agreement, what I'm doing is I'm telling them that I represent them as the seller's agent. That's the agency that they will have, okay? And I get that confirmation through the listing agreement. That's why doing it in order is important, okay? As much as what does it matter if it's all signed? Well, it does matter, okay? Now, a couple different things that you want to talk about, that you want to look at. They made some changes on the forms to better explain dual agency. Dual agency has been under attack in California for years. There are a lot of states that do not allow dual agency. Dual agency under California definition means the same brokerage, okay? So same brokerage represents buyer and seller. Agents may not even know each other. We might be in different counties, whatever. Same brokerage is dual agency. Now, there are other states that have certain guidelines where the same brokerage can do it, but the same agent can't represent both sides of the transaction, okay? Again, we don't have a law against that now. Is there something that might go into place? Yes, people talk about it all the time. It's come under attack probably about every 3 years. Something goes up to the legislators and they talk about doing it. One of the things that they do typically is they attack commercial first. So they go after commercial and they say, let's eliminate dual agency in the commercial space. They've gone after it about 4 different times in my tenure while I've been at C.A.R. and it has never succeeded. But for that reason, because bills have been presented saying that this is not fair and that we should outlaw dual agency, that's why we've expounded on what the responsibilities are and what you can and cannot do, okay? And so you're going to see this in the agency agreement and the AD, the agency agreement, and you're also going to see it in the PRBS, where it really goes into detail what you can and cannot do when you are representing both sides. And it's a little bit easier to read in the PRBS, so I'm going to go into detail on that one. But that's the first page. So that's why we have that agency agreement. So you want to go through and talk about the 3 different kinds of agency. It's important. And if you get sued, the attorney's going to ask if you went through that. So as much as it's easy to just go, here's an agency agreement, I'm the seller's agent, and then move on to the next page, you need to take the time, because you need to make that part of your practice. If you make that part of your practice and then you are sued, it's very, very easy for you to defend that and say, no, this is what I always do. What's interesting in court is if we say that this is my normal practice, and you can't lie, obviously, but if you say this is my normal practice, they'll be like, okay, then you must have done it. It's a very interesting dynamic on what they'll take and what they won't take. Okay, Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory. This is now in all of our listing agreements as well. One of the big things in here that I'll call your attention to is the chart. Now, when we look at fair housing guidelines on the federal level, I think we're up to 13 protected classes on the federal level. But then we get to California and we're super special. We have 22 protected classes. And my favorite is the last one on this chart, any arbitrary characteristic. What does that mean? Okay, well, we actually came into this. It was very interesting during the election time. We saw people, sellers, that were, let's just say, for Biden. And people walked in with Trump shirts. And they're like, nope, not gonna take their offer. That would be any arbitrary characteristic. And one of our favorites here in California that we hear a lot, and I can't blame them, but it is discrimination, is I will not sell my house to an attorney. Okay, any arbitrary characteristic. So when we come down to it, these are the things that we always need to talk about. And it's an interesting dynamic. I just actually had a report come in, and it was not my agent, for the record. But this being said, that the listing agent said, well, we really like your offer because we really don't want Asians in this neighborhood. And I'm like, wow. And the listing agent specifically said, just to be clear, they're not Asian, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, who is this person? And so we did report this person because we can't do this, guys. And I get it, everybody has different things that they've grown up with and there's different ideas in this world. When we are doing business, it is business. And it's a tough thing because we also have to focus our clients on that. Okay? One of the interesting things that comes up with this, so I am a military brat. My father is a retired captain in the Navy. And he bought our house in Chula Vista in 1974 or 76. And the only way that we had a family home was because he used his VA benefit. Okay, we did not have money. My mom balanced the checkbook down to the penny. Okay, when he sells that house, he's going to say, "I want it to go to a VA buyer with a family." That's what I want. And I'm going to have to say, Dad, you can't want that. We can't do that. And that's the thing that we all have to remember too when we're talking to buyers and sellers. A preference is discrimination because you're discriminating against everybody else. So when we're looking at certain things where VA welcome is something you can say, right? A VA loan is, but military preferred, no. You can't do that. Section 8, no Section 8, can't do that. Okay? So when we look at this, that is one of the most, that's one of the newest, is source of income, especially when we're looking on a rental level, but you will see this with different people when they're qualifying for things. Source of income is one of the new protected classes. So let's say I have alimony, I receive alimony from, let's go with 2 husbands. And then I have child support from 1, and then I actually have a job. So that's all of my source of income, and I'm going to go rent something, okay? Landlord looks at it and goes, what if husbands don't pay? She's not gonna be able to pay her rent. No, I'm not gonna take her because I don't feel that her source of income is strong enough, okay? Can't do that. That's discrimination. Section 8 has been one for years and years and years where we'd say, Section 8, no, we're not set up for Section 8, so we don't take them. Can't do that anymore, okay? So I want to bring that to everybody's attention. That is one of the ones that they're flagging for most right now, is that is source of income. But military, we see a lot here, and mostly not discriminated against, but shown as a preferred. So just be careful with that. This goes through all the different laws and why we can't discriminate, all of this stuff. I put this in here, well, because I put the whole form in here, but paragraph 7 is where it says sellers can't discriminate, because your sellers will push back. I want a family in this home. I raised my family in this home. I want to sell to a family. I do not want to sell to an investor. You can't do that. Any arbitrary characteristic. Okay, so when you are having these conversations, then it's not just your opinion. It's something that you can push back on. Here's where we are. This is what, I understand that this is a personal thing for you, but we have to treat this more as a business decision. Okay, examples of conduct that may be unlawful or improper. What I'll go into here, and the one that they really focused on here, was the buyer love letters. If you've been around for a while, we've done it, and gosh, we got good at it. I know, I would clip video of grandma with the grandkids, and oh look, this is who wants to buy your home, and you get your offer accepted. 25 offers on a property. They all sent buyer love letters. They all had videos. They all had pictures of themselves, right? 22 protected classes in California, right? Out of 25 letters, how many of those people probably fell into a protected class? We all can. I mean, familial status. When you have a family, you can fall into it, because somebody could say, well, you have a family, so I don't want to sell to you, right? And if you don't have a family, you don't have a family, so I don't want to sell to you. So we can all fall into these protected classes. So when those 25 offers were written, one was accepted. One person was super excited. 24 were super mad. And what they did is they filed discrimination lawsuits against the seller. You did not take my offer because I am fill in the blank. Okay? So now all of a sudden the seller's like, well, wait a minute. That's not true at all. Even if it's not true, they have to fight this. They have to defend themselves. To defend a claim in the state of California is crazy expensive. So C.A.R. will be more conservative. Their attorneys immediately said, stop doing this. Do not do buyer love letters. Okay, so it says it in here. That's an example of something that could be a problem, is buyer love letters. Then when we get into our RLA, you'll see that the default is that we're not allowed to give them anymore. Okay, now how many of us still like to do them? We like to do them because we want to be able to do something different. One thing that I always did as a listing agent is I would say, all right, Doreen, why do your clients want this property? Okay, not just any property. Why do they want this one? If Doreen can't answer my question, I'm like, let me look at the next one. Debbie, how about you? Why do your clients want this property? Because it's 5 minutes from their work and they love the school and the grandmother lives right down the street. Debbie's gonna stick, right? If I'm looking at who might cancel, there's my motivation. So did that have anything to do with any kind of protected classes? Not necessarily, okay? If you stick to the different dynamics. So you could, in fact, write a love letter that basically says, seller, you're super pretty and I like you a lot, okay? Where you say, we love this home. We love what you did with the backyard. It's amazing how that view is. I can't imagine how amazing it will be to watch the sun go down every single night. This is very close to our work, which is very, very helpful for us because it cuts down on our commute times. We can't wait to be owners of your new home. So you could do something where you still can stand out, but you're taking away those protected classes. So just different things to think about. All right, fair housing resources. I think we all have these. Kind of were beat over the head with these in 2020 and 2021, and now we all have it in our continuing education as well. So implicit bias training as well as fair housing. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. Okay, this was put in here because under the law, it's always been that if I take a listing, I can represent as many sellers as I want to. I don't have to tell the seller, I don't have to get the seller's permission. I can also represent as many buyers as I want to. Okay, that's just the way it works. Well, there was a lawsuit. Everything we do is because there was a lawsuit. And a buyer said, well, wait a minute, Nikki represented me, but she also represented another buyer. She never told me she could do that. Well, I didn't tell you I can breathe in and out either, but so anyway, all right, let's tell you. So now we're gonna tell you, it's okay, I can do this. That's what this form is all about. We tell them right up front, I can represent you, but I can represent all the multiple buyers, I can represent multiple sellers. Okay, so that's where it goes through that. This is where it goes through dual agency a little bit more. And this is one of the things that if you're reading nothing else, then going in on this and understanding the dual agency and what you have to explain to people is important in this one. Okay, so DRE pushed in on this 3 years ago. They said dual agency is a problem and you as a practitioner have to be able to prove when you're doing dual agency that you have discussed what dual agency means to this client. Like, okay, well, how do I prove that? Am I taking video? I mean, what exactly do we do? So anyone that's worked with the DRE directly, they have no answers for those. They're like, well, we'll know it when we see it. Okay, well, I don't know what that means. So what I say is push back on certain things. These types of paragraphs, if you're doing dual agency, circle them, star them. You know, have your client initial next to it. Send the information, do a confirming email where I say, you know, Doreen, I'm so excited to get your house into escrow. I just want to go over a couple of things. I'll go ahead and send you the signed contract today. We're going to have the inspection on Tuesday. And remember, this is dual agency. We discussed this in depth, and I will be representing the buyer as well. Please confirm, you know, do something like that to show that you've had this conversation. Now, as I say that, our commissioner, our DRA commissioner is going to retire. So who knows in 2 years if that's going to be the new hot button or not with the new commissioner. But for now, especially in the courts and in the state of California, to protect dual agency, which we all want to be able to protect dual agency in the state of California, okay? To do that, just make sure you make it a part of your practice. You want to go over the fact that, look, here's the deal. If it is dual agency, I cannot talk about the financial position of the client. I cannot talk about motivation. Now that one, as a practitioner, that's where I went, ooh, I'll bet you that's where we step in it the most. Because Doreen and I work for the same brokerage. And just so you know, I'm going to call on her the whole time. She didn't do anything wrong, but she's going to be the bad agent. Anyway, we work for the same brokerage. So if I say to her, oh, God, my client, they are in the nastiest divorce ever. It is crazy. I just need to get this sold. Do you have a buyer? Okay, I have breached my responsibilities. I cannot talk about motivation when we have dual agency. Okay? Now, if you work for another brokerage, I can come on over here and I can tell you my buyer's, my seller's motivation, but when we have dual agency, you can't. So you have to be careful. You never know what's in the room anymore. So that being said, you want to get a specific instruction from your client. If your client wants you to be able to say, look, it's a divorce sale, I need it sold as soon as possible, okay? Have them get it in writing, and I'll show you, additional terms. This is where you take any seller instructions that's outside the norm. Otherwise, you want to be really careful with timing. Oh, dude, I have to move at the end of the month because they're expecting me in Atlanta in 2 weeks. Okay, you don't get to talk about that timing, right? Unless your client tells you that you can. So just be careful with those things. So that's some of those triggers. And then this is the other one. Clients love to think that everything they do is confidential. Okay, I wrote an offer. You can't tell somebody about my offer. Okay, this is where it says offers are not confidential. So when your client pushes back on that and says, no, it is confidential, just pull out the PRVS. That's where it says offers are not confidential. Now, they could be confidential. Okay, so if my seller instructed me that, okay, if I receive multiple offers and other agents ask me where those offers are, and I feel it's in your best interest to share that information, will you allow me to share that information? My seller could say, no, I don't want you telling anybody. Okay, now I'm going to write that down as a seller instruction in my listing agreement. Okay, just like all the other things, we're going to talk about this too. To have additional pre-quals, cross-qualification, those kinds of things. These should be seller instructions, guys, because otherwise you're putting yourself at risk. All right, wire fraud and electronic funds. I think we've covered this one ad nauseum. I will tell you the one thing that I've seen in other states across the country. At NAR Risk Management, then we have all the different states in the room. There are many states that won't initiate a wire on Friday of proceeds because the FBI says if they can see that a wire has been intercepted within 48 hours, they can usually get most of the money back. So let's say that my seller is getting a $500,000 wire, okay? It initiates on Tuesday. We find out that it didn't hit his bank, so somebody intercepted it. We tell the FBI, typically what will happen is about 7,000 of it will be usually shaved off. They'll get it, these thieves, but they're able to find the rest of it and redirect it. If it's done within 48 hours. So if that wire is sent on Friday and we go through the whole weekend and we don't know that it was jacked until Monday, we've got a problem. FBI is not going to find it. So there are states that don't do wires on Fridays. It's been interesting because I haven't seen California turn to this. I'll tell you personally, I tell my agents, if you've got a large wire going out, I'm going to recommend that you say to your client in this whole wire fraud thing, okay, here's the deal. If we're going to transfer big amounts, then I'm going to recommend that you instruct me not to have escrow do anything until on a Friday. Because then you can make sure that you can see if there's been wire fraud involved. All right, and then who all you call if the FBI gets involved if there's wire fraud. All right, so all that, 40 minutes in, we're in the listing agreement. Date prepared. This is always going to be the date you started it. People ask me all the time, well, I started it on Tuesday, but then they canceled the appointment, and so then I went back in and finished it on Thursday. Which date is right? Doesn't really matter, okay? The whole reason why we put a date prepared on that is because anytime we make a modification to this particular contract, we're gonna reference the contract dated whatever. So if I put today's date, November 1st on it, and then I don't finish it till the 3rd, that's fine. But when I do a modification of terms or something like that modifies this contract, then all I'm going to be doing is looking for the date prepared, and I have to reference that date. That is a legal component. So oftentimes, like we'll see on counteroffers and addendums, people will say, this is an addendum to the purchase agreement dated. And agents leave that blank because they're like, I don't want to look that up. It's actually a legal component, so you do want to look that up. So when we look at this, this has the dynamics that need to be in here. I will tell you one thing right now. It does not automatically fill your listing begin date and your listing end date when you're in zip forms or your glide programs. Okay, so when it pre-populates, like if I do MLS Connect on this, okay, and it pre-populates certain things, then it will not pre-populate those. I cannot tell you the majority of listing agreements that are done, people just miss it because they look at it and they go, and that's why I have this filled in the way I do, because that's a pre-population and it's like, wow, okay, it looks like I just need to fill in the date. They miss that nice little line in the beginning. So if you do not have a start date and you do not have an end date, you do not have a contract, okay? You must make sure that those are in there. And you get that agent that goes, well, I'm not really sure exactly when they're going to want to start. Well, you don't have a contract. Contract law says it needs to have a start date and an end date. Okay? And then again, this is what we talked about, the RLA being the template for everything else. So if you are doing a manufactured or a mobile home, then you check the box and the little addendum will populate. And then probate, conservatorship, guardianship, or receivership, same thing. You're going to check the box and the addendum will populate. Okay, the idea there is that we just didn't want to have multiple listing agreements out there and have to learn each one. Listing price and terms. Okay, again, this is an element of a contract. How many of us, we go out, we're not sure exactly what they're going to agree to, right? We've got the paperwork, we want to, especially if we've been around for a while, we like that ink signature, right? We're going to do it right there on the spot. Well, okay, good, but you need to fill it in. If you don't fill it in, you don't have a contract. And again, I check files and I have 800 agents, so I see a lot where I'm like, dude, there's no price. Oh, well, we hadn't decided yet. But you did. You gotta write it in, okay? Make sure you're writing it in. And then listing terms. This can be a lot of different things. This is where you can write in that your seller wants a cross qualification. on all potential clients, okay? Your seller does not want to see any offers that do not have proof of funds and a pre-approval letter attached, okay? That's the default in our contract, but you don't have a specific instruction. Our instruction, by the nature of our contract, is to present everything that we have. If your seller is expecting 30 offers, and they're like, dude, no, let's just weed these out. And you can talk to them about this. You can say, well, here's the thing that I see that often will work, is if you put in a step of cross-qualifying with another lender, that'll weed out who really wants this property. And we'll make sure that we have a backup plan if their lender can't perform. Oh, I like that idea. Great, write it in as a seller instruction. You don't have to say it was my idea. You just say, this is the seller has instructed me to, okay? That's the same thing with any kind of delays on anything. And now it's actually built in, so I won't talk about that. But anything that the seller's instructed you to do, okay, then you can write in your listing terms. Compensation to broker. Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and jump into this now. There's been a little news on commissions and lawsuits. So do we expect to see things change a little bit? Honestly, yes, but not that much, okay? I get what the court said. I get what the court ruling was. But at the end of the day, I have never held a seller at gunpoint and told them they must pay a buyer's agent, right? This is what the decision was. You were forcing sellers to do this. No, I was giving sellers a method of being able to get these buyers to the door. So, do I think it's going to change a lot here in California? No, I really don't. I think we're going to be looking at buyers, have buyer representation agreements. And if you haven't danced with that new agreement, go ahead and take some time with it over the weekend, over the holidays, okay? Because there are some dynamics in there you just want to be familiar with. But at the end of the day, this is where, you will have some questions right now. So we're going to go over the specifics of what the form says. Seller agrees to pay broker compensation as follows. Blank percent, that is your total percent. And that is still the total percent right now. December, will we see a change? I don't know. Because right now that total percent includes cooperation for the buyer's side. Because that's how we've always done it, right? So let me take a random number out of the air, that number would be 10%, okay? So total commission, seller, you're going to pay me 10%. And then I go down in here and I say, and of that 10%, in 3D, I say, I cooperate with other brokers, and of that 10%, I'm going to offer X amount to that other brokerage, right? It's the way we've always done it. Now, with the new decisions, will that change? Will the language change? Probably. I imagine there will be some changes in that, but we don't know right now. So I get to talk, I'm going to go a little lighter on this paragraph, but this is where we are right now. You write a listing agreement right now, we have no other differentiation. So with the lawsuit, there is an injunction that has been filed. And if that injunction, we could have ruling on the injunction on Thursday, or they could request an evidentiary hearing. If they request an evidentiary hearing, then that'll be about 2 weeks, okay? And if that takes 2 weeks, then that's when we'll get the ruling on the injunction. The injunction is that NAR cease their cooperation, their cooperating compensation policy. Okay, so if that really happens and we do actually are told to stop, we may have to do something a little bit different. Now, is it going to happen? I don't know. So do keep your ear to the ground, but go to trusted sources. I love my Inman, I love my Risk Media, I love my Housing Wire, I read all of them. But at the end of the day, talk to your broker. Your broker has their ear to the ground, okay? Your broker knows what is dynamic to us here in California. One of the interesting things is across the nation, okay, this is huge changes for them because they all have different contracts. One of the things here in California, just like people saying, well, I no longer will be a member of NAR. Okay, you could all decide that tomorrow. But then you can't be a member of C.A.R. If you can't be a member of C.A.R., you have to pay for zip forms. Guess how much zip forms is every year? $1,000. Your memberships are $650. You're going to be a member of C.A.R, right? I mean, just from the pure financials. So in California, I don't see that a lot of this is going to change because of our price points here. But all that being said, okay, now I've gotten off the weeds. All right, so compensation to brokers. So I'm putting a specific percentage there, okay? Right now it includes both of them. Don't know what'll happen with that. This is also where you're gonna put in any transaction fees, admin fees, whatever. Talk to your broker about how they want those designated, okay? Some brokers only want certain terms used. All right, so then we go to, let's go 3A2, okay? If within blank calendar days after the listing period or any extension, blah, 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 okay? What do we usually write in there? Okay, so I've got nothing, 90,
180.
180, yeah, those are the ones that I usually see, okay? Now, all of that is good and fine, okay? This is anybody that I've identified that I brought to the property, this was all put in there saying, look, seller, if I brought somebody to the property and they saw it, they loved it, and then they're like, hey, why don't we cut out our agents and just do this on the side? Then we don't have to pay them, I save money, you save money, this will all be great. Well, first of all, that doesn't really happen all that often because our sellers are never home when our buyers are, okay? Or when our buyers go to see it. So this collusion doesn't actually happen all that often. But all that being said, this little protection clause, this only works if you're doing the cancellation or when your listing ends. You have to give a list of names, okay? So if you do not give a list of names, this doesn't apply. So understand that. If you're gonna have something expire or whatever, you do need to give a list of names. And that list of names needs to be buyer names, okay? I can't say, all right, so my listing, I only wrote the listing for 30 days. Don't know why, but that's what I did. And it's now expired, okay? And so I'm gonna give you a list. If you, seller, sell it to anybody that is on my list, then I get paid, okay? And my list is Doreen's client, Debbie's client. No, doesn't work that way. Under the law, they're only considered viable purchasers if I actually know their names. So if I don't know that it's John and Mary Smith, I can't put that name down, and no, I don't get paid under the law. So everybody thinks that's a catch-all and that, oh, I can just get paid. No, there's very specific terms. So if it comes up in your world, just make sure you actually read the paragraph. Let's see. You know what, I'll go into this a little bit too. If without written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale, conveyed, leased, rented, otherwise transferred, or made unmarketable by the seller, then I get paid. Yeah, good luck with that, okay? You know, I would say we all have to understand that in this business, we work on contingency, okay? We're going out there. And it's funny because I get this from my agents all the time. I had a bad feeling about this seller when I went out there. And I'm like, why did she sign a contract with them? You know, you got to walk away from those. Or keep talking until you feel that you have made your point. Because at the end of the day, are you really going to collect something from a seller? Most likely no. So as much as we have that in there, you can point it out to your client. Some people will go, okay, I will do what the contract says. But you need to also understand that we work on contingency and use your time wisely. If this is not a good person and you do not vibe with them, walk away because it will be a lawsuit. And those are always the ones that turn out to be a lawsuit. All right. In addition, seller agrees to pay broker. You can put in your transaction fee. This is where we get to 3D. 3D is required. Agents that have been around for a while, one of the things that I'll see when I do file reviews is they're like, well, I'll decide what I'm going to pay the other side. No, not your decision, okay? And it's even more not your decision right now because of all the press about the sellers saying, my agent made me do something. No, make sure you have it in the contract. Now, it is a breach of the Code of Ethics, Business and Professions Code, DRE regulations if you don't fill anything in 3D, but most of the time, your listing contracts aren't seen. So it doesn't come up that often. So make sure, now more than ever, here's a good time when you might be asked about it. So wait a minute, I understand that there was a lawsuit, now I don't have to pay the buyer's broker. Okay, be ready for that question. Nobody ever had to. Okay, why did we do it? You need to think about that, you need to explain the why, and you need to explain what's on the MLS right now. What did we talk about for marketing position? I've got a listing right now. There are 4 more like it, they're in this price point, and they're offering this much compensation, right? What's available, availability, you look at all the different dynamics that make it marketable, but I'm gonna tell my seller that. Okay, yeah, you don't have to pay anyone anything, but here's your competition. So what would you like to do? Make sure you're writing it in, okay? Okay. All right, so this is where 3F, if you saw this listed on the MLS, okay, you know it's expired, you know it was canceled, you know that it had been listed before, you need to pause here because that seller may have signed a listing cancellation agreement promising a part of your commission that you are now going to get. So that being said, it is the seller that's bound, but they're most likely going to push it off on you. So this is where you stop, okay? And you say, 3F, all right, I understand that you had a canceled contract. Do you have that cancellation of listing? I just need to see what the terms are so that I can fill this in correctly, okay? They don't have a cancellation of listing? Okay, call your broker. Let's make sure that that actually is all canceled. And guess what? It's getting a little sketchy right now. You gotta know, all right, let's look at this. But that's gonna be your trigger. You wanna look at that. When you've done your research, if you've done your research on your property, you've seen when it was listed, okay? And if it was recent, you wanna see that cancellation of listing. I see agents all the time that say, well, they said they had one, so I just went ahead. Okay, people say a lot of things, just so you know. It's not always true. You want to ask for that. All right. That's what we want that. Included and excluded. So a couple things on this. One, this has saved, I've been to a small claims claim against my listing agent. So my listing agent sold the property, okay? The seller absconded with the refrigerator, washer, dryer, oven, and then said, well, my agent never told me, my agent gave that stuff away, okay? All right, well, first of all, we don't give things away. It was all silly. And it was in the contract, and the client signed the contract, all of that. But what I'll say is that what really convinced the judge when we were there is that not only was it in the purchase agreement that seller signed, that the refrigerator, washer, dryer, and stove all conveyed, but we've also gone over it in the listing agreement. And this is where the pushback has been from DRE. With DRE is how much time are we spending with our sellers setting the proper expectations. So with this judge, we actually put on here additional items included. My agent had written in refrigerator, washer, dryer. Okay, she didn't write stove because stove at the time was already included in the boilerplate language. This was a few years back. So that being said, that was what they went, okay, you signed this and you signed another agreement. You always intended to give this away. And so they found first, very hard to win in small claims court, just so you know, when you're a corporation versus a buyer. And we won because of that. So now that being said, the seller says, yeah, I don't care about the refrigerator, I don't care about the washer and dryer. There are those of us that like, and I'm one of them, that like to go, all right, well, let's hold that back. Let's not include them in the listing. We can kind of use that as little negotiations down the road if we need to, okay? Just because it's here doesn't mean you need to include it on the MLS, okay? But if your seller tells you something needs to stay or can go, write it down because it's going to be helpful later on when they abscond with it and then blame you, okay? Not that I'm jaded, but that happens, okay? So you want to make sure that you go through that with them and go ahead and document it. And this is also where it says the purchase agreement supersedes anything else. So if we say here, additional items excluded, and my seller says the chandelier, it's grandma's chandelier, I'm taking it with me, I will remove it when I leave. okay? And then I've written in the MLS, chandelier does not convey, right? Okay, I told the agent when they called, chandelier does not convey. Then they wrote the offer, and we did not counter that chandelier does not convey. It says in our listing agreement, unless it's addressed in the purchase agreement, it does not apply regardless of what we do here. Now, is that seller gonna want you to pay for grandma's chandelier? Yes, they're gonna expect you to do that. So that's why I say, note it. Make sure you're writing down everything they tell you and put it in the agreement, because then we can reference back to it. Okay, leased or not owned items, and then smart home features. These are the new, smart home features is the new paragraph that they put in there, mostly because these are prompts for us, guys, okay? This is for us to remember to ask these questions. Why? Because these are some of the most litigated items. What happens is, well, wait a minute, I had no idea that the water softener was leased. Nobody told me. Okay, well, I didn't think to ask about it because it was buried in the garage. I was the listing agent. I never even saw the system, right? My client didn't mention it, and now we've got a dispute over this whole thing. That's what this is for. When you are sitting down with your client, you need to talk about these things. Do you have a water softener? Do you have a water filter? Do you have solar? Do you have whatever? You want to talk about these things. Do you own them? Do you pay a monthly bill? Are you on a contract? All of those things are things you are going to need to get to this buyer, because this is all disclosure. And what we're seeing more and more is, as these cases come into the courts are saying this is our responsibility. Our seller doesn't know better. Like, really? They signed the contract. How is it my responsibility? But at the end of the day, if that's what the courts are saying our level of responsibility is, that's why C.A.R. changed it and put so much in here. These are not for our seller. This is for us. Go through your checklist. Do you have any other liened items? Have you checked the title report? I ordered it. Oh, do I have to look at it? Yes. Look at it. Okay? Look up at the, you don't walk on the roof, but you can see solar panels. Look up. Okay? You need to take the time and go through and ask those questions. Is this owned? How many sellers, back in the day before probably, what was it when we started to regulate solar? I think it's 2021 that the legislation was passed. So before that, you had a lot of sellers that truly believed that they came in and put solar on my house and it's all free. I don't pay anything. And you're like, yeah, no, that doesn't happen. And it's a lien on their house, but they don't know that. These are questions you have to ask, and you have to set those expectations. Smart bulbs are expensive, and it's funny because one of the reasons why they're talked about 3 different paragraphs in the RPA now is because sellers know what they paid for all those smart bulbs, and then when they close escrow, they go take them all out and put in the dumb bulbs, and buyers are very angry. So, it's one of those things that these are your reminders. If you're not going through the contract with your seller, set aside some time, because this is how you're also going to set those expectations, okay? Multiple listing service. So what is an MLS? Going through the MLS. We don't see a whole lot of pocket listing kind of stuff down here. In some areas, they have private MLSs. They have little groups that try to just keep everything to themselves. We do a really good job of cooperating down here in San Diego County. So we don't see a lot held off the MLS. But because we did see it in the state of California where a listing agent would get a property and they're like, yeah, baby needs a new pair of shoes. I got to double in this bad boy. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. Okay? Well, that was why our MLSs were created years and years ago, because it's in the best interest of a seller and the buyers for this to be on the MLS, for all of us to cooperate and share. Okay? So, with that being said, when agents sometimes get it in their head that they're only looking for their best interest, which means double ending it and not telling anyone else, these are why we put all of this in writing for a seller. So that if I'm sitting in front of a seller saying, no, let's not put it on the MLS, I'm going to have a tough time making an argument for not putting it on the MLS, because this tells them it's in your best interest to do that, okay? benefits of using, blah, 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 opting out, reduction in exposure. The other thing that we've seen at different times is people using outside MLSs. A lot of this language in here really is not a thing anymore because of all the data shares. Quite honestly, C.A.R. MLS data shares with everything else. So it's really difficult to put a listing on something that isn't seen by everybody. But the language is here. The other thing too, where this says seller's initials and then brokers / agent's initials, this can be signed by the initialed by the agent. Okay, that's why it says agent's initials. When we take a listing, the way that it's viewed under the law is Mike did not take that listing. Mike's broker took that listing. He is an instrument for the broker. Okay, so technically everything is with the brokerage. He is the agent representing the brokerage. So in that, everything in the listing agreement technically would need to be signed by the broker, right? Or designated agents. So Mike would be that designated agent. So even though it says brokers there, we see a lot of agents that'll leave it blank and then as the broker, they send it to me. I do not need to sign this, you can sign this, so I point that out. All right, public marketing of properties. So this came into effect because of clear cooperation. Clear cooperation, one of the things you just need to always remember with clear cooperation is the intent. If you know the intent behind it, there are a lot of different dynamics that'll change your situation, but if you stick to the intent, you're gonna be fine. Okay, the intent of the clear cooperation policy that was put forward by NAR was that if I have a buyer and they drive down the street and they see a yard sign on 123 Main Street and they call me and say, Nikki, I thought you were sending me all the listings. There's a sign on 123 Main Street. You didn't send that one to me. And I went, okay, let me look it up. And I look it up and it's not on the MLS, right? I looked up. Clear cooperation was put into effect so I don't look dumb, okay? So as soon as you tell the public, you, the listing agent, Mike, the listing agent, as soon as he puts that sign in the yard and tells the public about it, he has to tell all of us realtors about it, to not look dumb, okay? So when you're thinking about the dynamics and the time frames and what if this happened and that happened, somehow my social media post went out early. Okay, some of us schedule our social media posts. You schedule your social media post to go out on Thursday and somehow it went out on Tuesday. Okay, you got to get that bad boy in the MLS because once again, that's the reaction. Do we want every other agent to get that call? Nobody liked getting that call. Okay, we all felt dumb when that happened. And so that's why clear cooperation is there. So this does kind of explain it. Do I think any sellers actually read it? No. But it does go over what public marketing is. And when we think about it, it's just anything outside your brokerage, okay? If all of you are within my brokerage, okay, and I can tell you about a property, but if one person walks in from another brokerage and I tell that person, I now have to have it in the MLS within 24 hours. So public marketing, public, is anything outside your brokerage. So that is, yes, I'm doing an open house for the neighbors, I'm sending out a postcard, I'm putting a sign in the yard. That's the one that catches most people, is the sign company will put the sign up early and you're not expecting it and you're like, oh! So then you have 24 hours to get that active in the MLS. And you can have it active or coming soon. The whole idea is to not look stupid. So even if I looked it up and it said coming soon and they're not going to show it until Saturday, I can still talk to my buyer and say, oh, 123 Main Street, looks like they're going to start showing on Saturday. Why don't we get an appointment for this now? Let me tell you more about it. I'll send you the listing. All right, seller instructs broker. So this is one of the new paragraphs that they put in. So, and what are we at here? 7D, seller instructs broker to market the property to the public and start, oh no, this isn't it. I lied. So this is where you can do kind of the SELM part. So we all have the seller's instruction to exclude the listing from the multiple listing service, right? That's your form SELM. Okay, that's what we've used before, where when I take a listing, MLS rules require me to have it in the MLS within 48 hours, okay? No clear cooperation, that's just always been the rule. When I sign a listing, I must tell all of you about it within 48 hours, unless my seller instructs me not to tell you for a certain amount of time. Okay, so you can actually do that in your listing agreement. I know in my brokerage, I know most brokerages, we prefer you to use the SCLM to do this. You can do it in the listing agreement too, but the reason for that is because if you get called out on a clear cooperation violation by C.A.R. MLS or by SDMLS, okay, they will ask for proof of the exclusion. Okay, so for me, if you do it in the contract, I have to give them my listing contract. And that annoys me because I don't think it's their business. Okay, so I know most brokers, I'd rather just give them the SELM. This is your business. This is what you're entitled to. You're not entitled to the entire listing contract. So you can do an SELM or you can write it in, ask your broker which one they prefer. And when we look at this, F, clear cooperation policy does not apply. Okay, I cannot tell you how many times this is checked. This is never checked in our world. Okay, San Diego County, all of our MLSs, everything that we have, all the way up through Orange County, top of Orange County. We have a couple after that that are private MLSs, so clear cooperation doesn't apply. But if you're here in San Diego County, Riverside County, Orange County, clear cooperation applies. Okay, that's what those MLSs have. All right, data on the MLS. So there are things that you can opt out of, okay? So how many times, and I don't see this all that often anymore. I know this was probably, gosh, back in the short sale days when people could make comments on your listing and they would make nasty comments, right? So they wrote it into our contract that there are a couple things that your seller can opt out of. Your seller can opt out of having their full address on the MLS, which we want to kind of talk them out of because everybody wants the address, right? But that being said, comments and reviews and automated values, okay? So Zestimate, this is something that I've encouraged my agents for years to go in when you're getting a listing, go do a Zestimate on it. If it's good, allow it. If it's bad, talk to your seller about not allowing the estimated value. Okay, because that's going to make a difference. I mean, honestly, people use it. No matter how many jokes we make about his estimate on social media, people still think that's a real number. So check that stuff out. And you can do it. And there's a form for that. So seller election to opt out is the form, and it's the SELI. Seller elects to opt out of certain internet features. So on that form, then it goes through automated value, comments, anything like that, address. All right, seller representations. Okay, so this is something too that you want to take the time to go through with our client. When you're looking up a property, when you take that listing, you should go into the Realist Tax Report or CRS, whichever system you're in, and look to see what is the history of that property. When I look at it, they've owned it for 4 years and there's 3 different mortgages on there. I'm like, oh. We've been refining, is there cash out refi? Do we have a problem here? It also tells me who I need at the table, okay? If I see that it's John and Mary Smith that hold title and John's calling me saying, I want to, I'm like, where's Mary? I'm gonna need Mary because she's on title, right? Or I'm gonna need to ask some questions. Did Mary pass away? Do we have, those are all indicators. So this is where you're gonna do some of your research. But it's also going to remind you that when you get to this paragraph, have there been any notices of default filed on the property? What do you owe on the property? Okay, this is something that most of us are afraid to ask because nobody wants to say that, okay? Especially when we know that those numbers are getting tighter, right? What do you owe on the property? Are you upside down? Okay, do you know that the courts think it's our responsibility to know if they're upside down? Yeah, and if they're upside down and we knew and we didn't convey it to the other side, we have liability as an agency. So that's why it's in here. Once again, here are your reminders. This is what we want to talk about. We want them to be excited about all the millions of dollars they're going to make on the sale of their home. But we also want to make sure, all right, can we get this done? And what are we going to do to have to do to get this done? Okay, litigation, arbitration, anything like that. And when you're looking in newer home communities, something that's a new build, remember that there's 10 year for construction defects. So when you're looking at this, again, you're gonna do your homework. This is you getting in on this property. All right, so it's only 8 years old, it's kind of, okay, we might be, let's look at the developer. Let's look to see if there's litigation. So you wanna be able to ask those questions. The other thing too, that they talk about here, special assessments. Right now in condos, as you may know, okay, then insurance is an issue in California. Getting insurance. And getting insurance that's affordable is an issue in California. One of the things that we've seen is condo complexes, they can't get their master plans renewed at a reasonable rate, okay, because they happen to be in a high fire severity zone. So that happening, okay, if my condo fees were $300, okay, but now they're trying to renew my the master plan, and these master plans are up to 10 times more than they were before. They are putting special assessments on each owner to be able to pay for that, because otherwise we're not compliant with our loans. So we all have to pay a part of it. But understand, these are dynamics that as you listen to the news, as you are a student of the game of what we do, this is what's gonna make you better because you know what questions to ask. And when I have a buyer, then I know to say, okay, now wait a minute, okay, let me see the rider for your insurance. Has there been any discussion about special assessments? When your buyer gets those HOA docs, you want to say, look at the minutes and see if there's any discussion about special assessments and what the insurance is, okay? You want to be able to point them in the right directions. All right, broker and seller duties. So when we look at this, the way that it comes out under California law, under real estate regulations, is that as the listing agent, then it is my responsibility to present all offers as soon as practicable. Okay, what does that mean? I love our legal language because we like to leave it open to interpretation. It does not mean whenever I want to, okay? What it actually means is whenever the seller wants me to, and when the seller can do that. So unfortunately what we see is we've had a lot of agents that, and I'm not saying this to be mean. I've done this for 25 years. So when I used to take a listing, I ran the listing. Okay. Yes, the seller was involved, but I'd say I will look at offers. We will. I didn't put in the we. I didn't necessarily say this is my seller's choice. Okay. We have to do that nowadays. Okay. So when I go into my seller and say, all right, when do you want to put it on the market? They go, well, what do you think? Say, we all have our little strategies. I know I do. I like Thursday. Gives them a couple days to look at it. It's scheduled for the weekend, right? Especially right now. Time change is going to happen, guys. We're not showing anything during the week, right? So you got to be a little more careful with your dates. So this is what I would recommend. We put it on the market on Thursday, and that you instruct me not to bring you any offers until Monday at 3 p.m. That way it gives us some time to let everybody see it. We won't have a frenzy, but we'll get those offers in, and we've set a deadline for it. Okay, that sounds great. So used to be that we'd have that conversation, and nobody really, and what I would say as an agent is I would screw up and say, I'm not presenting offers until 3 o'clock. Okay, well, that's a no-no. We can't say that because that's not my choice to make. So now they have it in here, presentation of offers. Seller instructs broker to not present offers until a later time. So we can actually write this in. I'm going to list it on this date, and I'm going to present the offers on this date. So instead of us writing our own language in there, okay, then we actually have it written in. One of the things that that I do anticipate we'll see also is seller instructs broker to do a cross qualification with the following lender. Because we're seeing more and more right now, lenders are pushing back and saying, listing agent, you can't tell a buyer that they have to cross qualify. And they're right, the listing agent cannot, but the seller can. Seller can require somebody to cross-qualify. So it's a seller instruction. Anything like that, if the seller wants the buyers to wear booties, okay? If the seller wants only any seller instruction, you should get it right. Because at the end of the day, everybody thinks they're a victim, and there's a lot of discrimination lawsuits out there. So you just want to be careful. If the seller tells you something, document it. Okay, and that's what this is about. So that's built into there, and then here's our buyer love letters. Okay, so look at the default. C1, seller instructs broker not to present buyer letters when submitted in an offer or separately. Okay, so right now, if I've checked no other boxes in my listing agreement, okay, and Mike sends me an offer with a love letter, and I give it to my seller, Doreen, okay, I've breached my contract. You cannot do it. Mike sends me flowers and says, please, Nikki, please give him the love letter. It's really good. Okay, all right, well, I'll do it for you. No, we have a contract, right? There are terms. So if your seller wants to see these, you have to check the box and they need to sign them, okay? Otherwise, the default is. So when you get that, Mike, no, come on, Nikki, please. I'm sorry, Mike. The seller has instructed me not to present any buyer love letters, okay? That's what your default is. All right, investigations and reports. Again, this is back for us. Okay, this is a reminder. What do we want to look at? Okay, if I know it's in a high fire severity zone, and guess what? 6 months ago there was a fire. We might want to look at some additional reports, right? There's a new one, Fortress Fire Report, that's supposed to help us when buyers are having difficulty getting insurance in high fire severity zones. So that may be something that they're going to add to this as a suggested report. But if they are in high fire, right now, if you're in a defensible space zone, there are few enough listings and enough buyers that usually the seller can say, hey, that's on you, buyer. You do the defensible space inspection. You pay for it. You pay for any compliance, right? Because that's the market that we're in. But it may shift. And when that shifts, okay, if I've already pulled my NHD, which you should do as part of your due diligence, I pulled my NHD report, I see that it's in a high fire severity zone, I see that it's in a defensible space compliance zone, okay, we may say, guess what, it takes 2 months to get those reports, those inspections and reports right now. Let's go ahead, I'm gonna recommend, seller, that you go ahead and do that now, because you're gonna need to give it to any buyer, okay? Again, it's a discussion item. For those of us that have been around for a while, when we listed something once upon a time, we said, we get the termite inspection right up front, right? This is what you need to do, seller. And now, it's not what they need to do, okay? They're not required to do it at all. But if I walk up and I can see the termites holding hands right there on the patio, I might want to say, let's look into this because we want to find out what this number is, right? But this is a reminder to us. What have you seen when you did your walkthrough on the property? What did you see that you want to talk to the seller about? This is your opening, okay? We all get stuck and we don't want to say bad things. We don't want to, okay, well, that looked like crap. What happened there? You know, you can say, there's some inspections. I noticed on the roof in the back, it looks like something has gone in. Do you want to get a roof inspection before we get going? This is your in, okay? So use this as a tool. And then the other one, of course, is homeowners association docs. Find out, when they have an HOA, ask the seller to call the HOA and find out what the timelines for getting documents are, okay? Some of them have them online now, okay? A lot of them do not. And when you call as the agent, we all love to be helpful, right? I call the HOA and I say, I am the listing agent for this property and I'm gonna need HOA docs. They don't care about me. They have no obligation to me. They are obligated. An HOA has a fiduciary duty to that seller. Lean in on that. Anything and everything you need from that HOA, don't put it on your shoulders. Help your seller. This is what you need to ask. Here's all the questions. But they have a duty to that seller. They can't ignore them. They can ignore us. All right. Indemnification. So this is the big one with open houses. As you know, DRE came out a couple years ago and said very specifically that as a brokerage, when I hold an open house, that is a listing activity. Okay? So if Mike comes to me, he's from a different brokerage, and he says, Nikki, can I hold your house open? Okay, according to DRE's interpretation, no, because holding an open house is a listing activity and he is not an agent for the listing broker, okay? So DRE has now danced around this a couple times and said, well, we can see that it could be a buyer activity, but if you were holding the open house as a buyer's agent, what the DRE says our obligation would be is to say, hi, I'm Nikki Coppa. I'm a buyer's agent. I'm here to represent buyers. Are you represented by somebody? No? Okay, great. then I will take you through this home. I have to really say I am not the listing agent. I am not a part of the listing side of this. Now, nobody's gonna do this. DRE was shopping, okay? Last summer they were shopping. They would go around, they'd see the sign in the yard, take a picture of the sign in the yard, and then ask for Mike's card. If those two brokerages didn't match, both brokerages were being fined, okay? So, DRE opinion, again, commissioner's gonna retire. Is this gonna continue? I don't know. We did it for years where we held each other's houses open, right? And there was no big deal. But here's the big deal, is insurance. So this particular paragraph, it says, seller further agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold broker harmless from all claims, disputes, litigation, blah, 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 from everything in the world, okay? The broker. So, I have the listing, Mike holds it open, he's with a different brokerage, okay? Somebody comes in, they trip, they fall, okay? That buyer then sues my seller, says, because it's their property, right? So they sue the seller. Seller says, what the heck? Nikki, you're my listing agent. Why did you let Mike hold it open? Because Mike obviously made somebody fall. Now they're gonna sue me, right? Because I didn't have that right to do that. And Mike's gonna call his E&O and he's gonna call his GL and a general liability insurance carrier, and they're gonna say, you weren't contracted to hold this open house, so you have no insurance, okay? My carrier is gonna say, you weren't allowed to let him do that, so you have no insurance. There's a claim right now in the courts where this happened, okay? The Mike in this situation is out $168,000 right now in defending this, okay? No insurance coverage whatsoever, okay? The listing agent is $77,000 in defending it. I don't even know how hurt the buyer really was, or the person really was, but at the end of the day, that's what's gonna hurt us. A DRE, what their opinion is, one way or the other, you need to look when you're doing activities, what have you been empowered to do? Okay, that's why when I sign a listing agreement, I have this indemnity, right? So when they try to sue me, as long as I was there, and they say, no, well, Nikki, I'm gonna sue you too. No, you've already agreed to indemnify me. You can't sue me if I was the one there. Or I have Doreen from my company there, because it was a listing activity. Now I'm covered, but otherwise I'm not covered. I don't know how this one's going to turn out, but I am watching it to see what ends up happening. But when you're looking at certain things, that's why it's important to understand what we're empowered to do with our contract. All right, deposit. This is where we go back through agency relationships again. And again, in California, it's a thing, right? You have to go through. Did we tell you the different kinds of relationships that could exist? Yes. Did I tell you what our relationship is right now? Did I declare? Yes. Okay, I told you seller representation, buyer representation, dual representation. I told you right now we're signing a listing agreement. There is no buyer. So guess what? I only represent you, seller representation, right? And then I will confirm that in the contract when we sign the contract. Those are the 3 steps of agency, okay? All right, confirmation, blah, blah, blah. So this is where we go into our PRBS, termination of agency relationship. This can happen, and there is a form for that, but it doesn't happen all that often. You will see this more and more if agents switch brokerages. Okay, again, the brokerage binds sellers, right? All listings belong to your broker. So you don't say, well, that's my listing. No, it's not. It's your broker's listing. Okay, so if that broker agrees to terminate agency to allow that listing to go get agency with someone else, then there's a form for that. So that's where you may see that coming in more and more, because we're starting to do that. Security insurance, showings, audio and video. One of the things that you need to know is that in the state of California, it is not our obligation. None of this is our obligation. However, as agents, we always want to inform our clients, right? Almost everything out there has some kind of camera, okay? Camera surveillance or audio surveillance. First of all, if you're going out to a property and you're not thinking about that, you need to put a little sticker reminder on your hand or something. You're being watched. And I will tell you, as a broker, there are some bad things on video. Sometimes we don't remember that we're probably being watched every place that we are and listened to. Now, okay, what the law says is that if you are inviting people into your home, okay, and you have audio or video surveillance, you have to let them know. Okay, there's no formal way of that. Literally could be a post-it note on the table that says audio and video recording in progress. Okay, that's fine. So, do we need to ask these questions as listing agents? Yes. We need to say, okay, do you have security on here? Do you have audio or video? Because under California law, you are required to put that notice up. Okay, and this got highlighted because this was actually Sacramento, not San Francisco. Buyers were in the home. The wife loved it. Oh my God, let's go full price. The husband said, well, now wait a minute, I don't want to go full price. Let's go $5,000 under. Had this great negotiation right there in the living room while the seller was watching them on video. Seller countered full price, and then the buyers, of course, went, now wait a minute, you watched us on video? They sued the seller, and they got the money back, and all their court fees, okay? So this was, when you go to court and you get any kind of judgment, you're talking about $25,000 minimum. So at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you're talking about that. And remember that when you're showing your buyers and you're talking about pricing and can they afford it, don't do it there. Say, shh, there could be audio and video here. Let's discuss this when we leave, okay? Photographs and internet advertising. Okay, the big thing here is understanding the dynamics of what will happen when it goes out there. Sellers. If your seller is very, very privacy oriented, you want to spend some time on this paragraph. You need to let them know that once this goes on the MLS, it goes everywhere. You cannot get it back. Okay? Once it gets syndicated, there's no way we can get it off of every single site. Because that's just how it works. The MLS will syndicate to one site, that then syndicates to 10 other sites, that then syndicates to 10 other sites. It will never come back. So again, if privacy is an issue, you really want to hone in on this paragraph, okay? and talk to them about the fact that you can't get this back, and you can't really control it, and that other people will likely shoot video on your property. When an agent shows, how many times do we see that now on social media? Agents want to show that they're busy. Showing a property here in Del Mar, isn't this awesome? Don't you want to live here, right? Okay, now C.A.R. MLS is looking at that going, can we make that a violation? And is it a violation? Are they representing it as their own, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? At the end of the day, set the expectation, okay? Set the expectation that people are going to go through everything. Yes, they probably will open your closet door. Don't be offended when they do. Talk to your clients about what will be out there. Photographs, keysake, lockbox. Okay, so lockbox on there. This goes through what the lockbox will in fact do and who has access to it. One of the things that our contract also says is that we are empowered. The default right now is that as a listing agent, I am empowered to allow others to access the property for purposes of selling the property. Once upon a time, if I let a contractor in, I had to have written permission from my seller. Yeah, none of us did that. So now we write it into the contract. So guess what? If we need to let a contractor in to do whatever, then we already have written permission that's written into the default of the contract. Sign, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so additional terms. This is where you're going to write in any of your instructions. So seller wants cross quals, seller wants all offers submitted on pink paper, seller wants whatever they want, okay? This is where we're going to write it in. And then we also put a box here for seller intends to include a contingency to purchase a replacement property as part of any resulting transaction, okay? Is that a contractual agreement? No. It's just that what sellers wanted, they were like, well, I don't want to list with you because if I don't sell this, then I'm not going to, I want that property, but what if? So there's just a checkbox that, look, everybody's like that. What you're going to use, if that happens, is the SPRP, seller purchase of replacement property. Okay? Agents that have been around for a while, we used to just write it into the counteroffer, seller to find replacement home. Smiley. We can't do that anymore. once we make a form at C.A.R., you got to use the form, okay? SPRP, it sets the contingency time frame, it sets the rules for removing the contingency, you have to use the form. Okay, so with that, that's where you can write in your additional terms. That's where you can check the box and talk about that. Make sure that the seller understands that yes, they are bound. Once they sign a contract, they are bound with that buyer. However, if they do have a contingency to purchase, then that's where they get out of that. And then management approval. This doesn't really happen all that often, where a manager will look at the file and kick it back. But most of the larger brokerages, at least, have a 5-day file review set up that we look to make sure that all the dynamics of a listing agreement are done correctly, because the broker's bound to it. Dispute resolution. All right, so this goes to the default is that we will go to mediation, and this is between the seller and the broker. So when we're looking at it before, when we were all the way back in the beginning where they negotiated, the buyer and seller got together and said, let's cut out the agents, right? And I said, this says you can go after them. Okay, now we're going after them. Here's our dispute resolution. I deserve payment, you don't want to pay me, right? So we say we'll go to mediation. We agree to mediate any dispute first, okay? And then we can go to arbitration, okay? So, and what is arbitration? Mediation, just as a quick reminder, mediation is not binding. It is literally when you and your sister went up to dad and said, she did it, right? This is what mediation is. Dad tries to hear both sides of the story, and dad tries to figure out how to make you equally unhappy and equally happy, right? That's mediation. But nobody has to agree to anything. If Doreen thinks she does not owe me $50,000 and I think that she owes me $50,000, we sit there with the mediator and the mediator says, Doreen, don't you think she deserves something? And then the mediator comes over and says, do you really think she has to pay you? And all we try to do is find middle ground. And nobody gets there, nobody settles anything unless we agree, okay? So you get to pay for the privilege of mediating with no guaranteed results. Then if you don't have a result there, then you get to pay for arbitration, and then one person, an arbitrator, will make a decision. Doreen's right, and she gets everything, or I'm right, and I get everything. Usually arbitrators don't split the baby. It's usually all or nothing. Okay, entire agreement. If we change anything, then the other provisions will still apply. Ownership, title, and authority. This is where this was put in because there were some instances of second and third common law marriages that weren't really marriages, but I've lived with him in this house, so I have rights. Okay, then there were some lawsuits that were filed, and this was in the central region. That being said, we've never really had this come up here where we have an additional person with authority, but it could, so you do have a blank line for that. All right, legally authorized signers. So entity sellers. Who are our entity sellers? Most often, it's somebody with a trust, okay? If it's a living trust, okay, then you have to look and see who the signers are on the trust. The other element in the trust, it will say who has the power to convey property. Okay, so if there's two people on my trust, I may have my trust written that I have the power to convey all property with no signatures required. I may have it in there that both trustees must sign. Okay, so when agents will ask me all the time, okay, so who needs to sign? I don't know. Look at the trust. We have to go back to that. The other thing is when you have a trust and somebody's passed away, okay, there's certain things that need to be done. Whenever you have a listing and it's a trust, you want to reach out to your title person right away. Alrighty, I have a listing coming up. It's a trust. I'm going to get you the trust paperwork because then they do what's called a trust certification. They're going to go through and say, I need a death certificate, I need a power of attorney, I need a whatever. At the end of the day, our contractual obligations, I mean, think about it. When I go out and I sign a contract with the seller, I don't even ask them for ID. Our contractual obligations are kind of low, right? Title, now they're the insurance. What do we say is a problem in California? Insurance. Title wants to dot every single I and cross every single T. So I might look at a trust and say, yeah, that looks good to me, okay? But title says, oh, no, 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 wait a minute. This was dated then, and I see another recorded document that was dated a year later. So therefore, I need that document. Title's going to go through that because they're the ones that have to ensure title. So that's where you want to take it. Power of attorney, especially with military. You know, again, military brat, right? So my mom was like, I have power of attorney. It's a general, it's not a specific. And most title companies will not record without a specific power of attorney. And they want their own language. So again, anytime you have an entity seller, you want to reach out to your title rep and then talk to your title officer, okay? Not just the rep, I know they're super nice, but you want to talk to the title officer, make sure that that officer has looked at the trust or the power of attorney. So those are the most common that we see. So now you can do it without having to do an RCSDS. Remember the RCSD? I know we all had nightmares, right? Okay, we don't have to do it anymore because it's built in, the language is built into our actual listing agreement. And then we get down to broker signatures. All right, the one thing that we're going to see here is that we have a checkbox. 2 different brokers with 2 different companies are representing this seller, okay? We are going to see this more and more. It was very, very rare that we co-brokered things in the past. We are seeing it a lot right now. One of the most interesting dynamic that I see is my relative wants to hire me because they trust me. They know I'm a nerd, they know I know the contracts, right? But they live in San Francisco. And I'm like, dude, I'm not going there, and I don't know there. So they say, okay, so get me a local. I want you to find me a local that can represent me there and give me the local flavor, but I want your representation as well. This is what's happening more and more, is more of that, I want the trusted person and then I want the local person. We also see it in higher end properties where this client has been with me forever. They started off in the $100,000 condo and now they're in the $10 million home. And they're like, Nikki, I love you, but you work in Chula Vista, okay? You're not really La Jolla type, okay? I need a high-end broker that can get me exposure up there. Okay, so they still want to use me, but they also want to use another broker. So when you do that, you have 2 brokers with agency. So you establish that using the ABA, CAR Form ABA, Additional Broker Advisory. So there's a checkbox for that and it'll populate. Seller's Advisory. We are going to make it out on time, I swear. All right, so when we go through this, the Seller's Advisory is actually really, really good. When I was clipping this out like yesterday, well, actually late last night, I was clipping it out of the contract and I'm going, wow, you know, we need to bounce back on this a little bit more. One of the forms that I have in here that I'll show you is the Disclosure Information Advisory. Love that for sellers. But I will say the Seller's Advisory is really good too. We just push this paper around and we don't often look at it. Take a minute, go through it, because it does talk about the general things that you do, and it's a good way to set that tone. When I sit with the seller and I say, you're gonna have to do disclosures, and they're like, okay, I've lived here 40 years, I know everything. Do they remember everything? And what is the duty under the law? Under the law is that seller has to tell buyer everything they know. Okay, that's a lot to remember if you've lived there for 40 years. And it doesn't matter if it was fixed. Okay, this is coming in more and more. We had a roof leak in '89. We fixed it. That seller is not going to disclose that because in their world, it didn't exist anymore. It was fixed. It is still something that under the law must be disclosed. These are the lawsuits we're seeing. Because guess what? Now apparently there's toxic mold that's taking over the whole house that happened because of that roof leak that wasn't disclosed in 1989. So what we're seeing from when I was actually up with DRE investigators. It was pretty fun. The room was 77 DRE investigators. Anyway, their whole pushback was that we do not explain to our sellers just how important the disclosure duty is. So when I hear this kind of stuff and then I see the courts making certain decisions saying, yeah, it really is your responsibility to figure out who put the solar on the house and if it really was free. Sellers don't know that is your duty of care. Then I go, okay, we've got to look at this more and more and set a better tone. So I would encourage all of you, go through the seller's advisory, okay? And then the other form that I'm going to show you here, the disclosure information advisory. And if you're not doing it now, put your disclosures in front of your sellers right up front. I love Glide. I love that they have to fill it in online because then they can write a lot more and I can actually read it. So it's awesome. I love Glide, but I print out the SPQ and the TDS, the FHDS if that's required. Any other ones, I will print those out for my sellers and I leave them when I leave. I say, this is your homework. I want you to start every day. I want you to do at least 10 minutes. Walk around and read a question and go ahead and start getting this done. Because it will get the wheels turning. And especially if they've been there for 30 years. This is a lot to disclose. And I want to go through with them that it doesn't just mean that it's a problem right now. It means that it happened. We had a leak. We fixed it. Okay? All you have to do is say that, and now you're not liable for it. But you don't say it, and that's seller non-disclosure. Did the seller know? Yes, they paid to fix it, and they didn't tell the buyer. So setting those expectations are incredibly important. Statutory duties, remember these are the statutory disclosures. That is what is required by law. So this is where when you get that seller that says, but wait a minute, I bought it as an investment property, I've never actually even seen it. It's been a rental forever, so I don't have to do any disclosures. Yes, you do. Yes. Under the law, you do. So this is where you can push back and say, yes, this is what you have to do under the law. Then it talks about death and disclosures. Okay, I get this a lot. And what's interesting about the death one, the death question here, is technically the way the law reads is that it happened on the premises in the last 3 years. Okay? But if you read the C.A.R. legal Q&A on the topic, it says that if it was a notorious death, then you must disclose it. Okay, what's notorious? Once upon a time, it was hard to get on the news. Now, you guys could be on social media right now. You could be trending for all I know, right? So what is notorious? When in doubt, disclose. All right, disclosure information advisory. This is where, if you have not read this, read this document. Go through it, okay? Go through it with your client. It's one that I leave with my sellers, is I'll go in and say, all right, so here's your homework, here's your TDS, here's your SPQ. I put this on top. Here are your instructions. So if we look at paragraph 2, okay, read and carefully review all questions on the disclosure forms, blah, blah, blah. So this goes through, one of the things that our contract says is that if you have a question about what to disclose, your agent cannot answer it because that's determined to be legal advice. So if I can't answer the question, okay, my client just gets mad at me and thinks I'm being mean, right? I can't say, well, you need to call an attorney for that. At the end of the day, I appreciate that that's what our contract says, but this is real life practice, right? So use this. You can go back to, well, the disclosure information advisory says that if you think it might be something that you should disclose, that the best course of action is to disclose, okay? C.A.R. attorneys wrote this for us because they can give legal advice. Because we are members of C.A.R., we can use the forms and pass them along without that being considered giving legal advice. So all of those things that we've always said to our clients, when in doubt, disclose, right? And we've been like, oh, hope we don't get caught. Is that giving legal advice? Just push back on here. Every single thing that you've ever said to your clients about disclosure is in here. All the questions. Okay, it talks about verbal. What if, the crazy lady the eccentric lady down the street comes in and says, well, I heard that the guy next door did, and you're like, stop talking. Do I have to disclose this? She was clearly, and I get this call, she was clearly drunk. Do I have to disclose it? Yes, you have knowledge at this point, okay? If you are told something, but it says it in here. So once again, if your client asks you, instead of you saying, yes, the answer is yes, you can look at it and say, actually in the disclosure information advisory, it says very specifically that if you have verbal information, that you should convey that verbal information, whether or not you know it to be true, or you think it's true, okay? So, and that comes in later too, because that same seller will say, well, you can't Dorian, you can't disclose that Mary said that Joe did whatever, okay? Mary's crazy. Your seller's gonna get mad at you. And you're like, I have to. This is how you show them this is the obligation under California law, okay? So if you haven't leaned into this, it is an awesome form. I went long, so I'm gonna skip over these slides here, but this is part of the disclosure information advisory. It'll actually break these things into different sections. The one I'm gonna hit on here is TDS section 1. So forever, if you've been around forever, nobody checked anything, right? Okay? Now, if nobody checks anything, your disclosure is not complete. Therefore, the 5-day right of rescission remains open the entire transaction. Okay? So what this says is, seller, you have to check something. Okay? So you can push back. And when they don't check it, and what they're usually going to check is no substituted disclosure for this transfer. Okay, substituted disclosure, who has seen the Redfin disclosures when they resell something, or Open Door, or any of those institutional buyers? When they resell something, they have their own regurgitated TDS. That would be a substituted disclosure. This is the real disclosure, so it's almost always that they check that box. But if that box is not checked, and that goes over to the buyer, and we are at the last day before close of escrow, and that buyer cancels that transaction, that buyer gets their deposit back. This is a statutory disclosure. It was not completed. Therefore, you left that 5-day right of rescission wide open. So again, take yourself through this form. Then that's what you push back on. You don't want the seller to do anything. You want to say, seller, in accordance with California law, this is what it says. And you can push back to get those things completed. That's really the big one on that. And of course, under everything else. I don't know how many there are. It's one of my favorite ones is, okay, bottom of page 1, where it says roof, and there's a blank line. Everybody leaves it blank.
Wait, yes, no.
I am pretty sure we all have roofs, right? You're like, okay, that is an incomplete TDS. You left the 5-day right of rescission open. And again, we don't put pen to paper, but we do guide our clients. Okay, so with that, that's your homework. Sorry, I didn't get through that part. I'll do better next time. The end.